Every time I have the chance to come to one of these things, I find myself humbled by the company I'm put with, and today is no exception. So I will try and be efficient with my time so I don't rob it from this great group we have up here. So as I was thinking about a little set of slides today, and I'm not sure, I guess I'm going to stand for this so I can, because I got a lot of turning to do. So I put up there this title, DVRs Change Everything, and I don't know, it just occurred to me this morning that there's so much talk this election cycle going around about change, right? So, and not just one candidate in particular, but in general, it's a big theme, right? But there's all this talk about change. It just stumbled into my mind. It's a little ironic that in the midst of all this talk about change, the way in which that message is getting delivered is being radically changed. And I'm not sure anybody is really talking about that change. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. But spreading a message and communicating with your constituents, audience, targets is radically different today than it was even a few years ago. So let's see if I can get this sucker to... That's not it? All right. So a couple points I was going to cover. So I have the luckiest job in the world, I think. I work at TiVo. We'll talk a little bit about TiVo. But not only do I work at TiVo, I'm the guy who gets to pull back all the viewing information that we're able to collect within a very strict privacy policy, I might add. So I don't, it's all disguised and masked. I don't know anything about any individuals. But on an aggregate basis, I get to play around on a daily basis and see what people are watching and not watching. And I can't imagine a more fun way to spend my life. We'll talk about what DVR as a phenomenon is. That leads to time shifting and fast forwarding of the way people consume video content, which is a big deal and creates a big communications challenge. Just so you have a sense, how many people in the room have DVRs in their home? TiVos? All right, so that's most of the room, right? So television is changing forever. Are you prepared? I didn't create this little graphic, and I'm not so fond of it, but what you see is DVRs piled up on top of each other. You talk to anybody who is in the business of forecasting the proliferation of this technology, and they all come up that it's a big number. Today, somewhere in 2008, you see 30 million. I think that was an end-of-year projection. We're close to that number already, so it's probably a little bit under. So it's about a third of the households, not quite, have DVRs already. Most people believe that'll be 50 or 60 million households by the end of the decade. So that's a lot of households, but more importantly, I would think for this audience, certainly for most of my private sector clients, is that's a lot of households, and they happen to be probably your most important households. They tend to be somewhat higher income, more educated, they skew a little more urban. It's not on the slide, but I'll also tell you they over-index in consumption of every other type of media. So not only do they watch a lot of TV, they control it with their DVR. They consume more newspapers. They consume more magazines. They consume more radio than any of your other consumers. So in these households that have this device, these are very important households. So they're not just randomly scattered. And what happens when you have a DVR, which you all know because you all have DVRs, is you start watching a lot of programs on your own time. You take control of the television schedule. And we call that time shifting. Right, so how much of that? And I bet you if I polled the room, a lot of you would say, I never watch live TV anymore. And I'm sure a lot of you would say, I never watch a commercial anymore. I hear that all the time. And that may be true for you. I'm not going to call you a liar, but I will tell you that it's not entirely true across our population. But it is a major effect on how people consume TV. So for instance, and there's not many numbers in this presentation, but here's just a couple to keep in your head. For the TiVo universe, about half of their viewing in prime time on broadcast networks is time shifted. Okay? So that means half of it still occurs live when the network says you're supposed to watch it. But at least half of it happens on some other time. And I have to tell you that the more popular the program, the more as a percentage of it is time shifted. So the biggest shows on TiVo, for instance, Grey's Anatomy, #1 show on TiVo, we often see 75 or 80% of that viewing on a time-shifted basis. And why is that important? Because once you start time shifting, you start fast forwarding, or you have the ability to fast forward. Right? And what do you fast forward through? You fast forward through commercials. And again, if I took a poll, I bet you a lot would say, I haven't watched a commercial in 2 years. It's not quite that bad on an overall basis, but it's not too far away from that. Once you get into time-shifted viewing, our data says that, call it 2/3, up to 70% of commercials are fast-forwarded through. So you start doing that math, that's a whole hell of a lot of money that people are spending on commercials that are getting zapped right through by these very influential and important households in the most expensive media that you're buying. So that's obviously a big deal for my private sector clients who are trying to move their brands. It's obviously very important to everybody in this room as well. So how do I know all this? And this is the only slide about it. So TiVo is a beloved brand. We sell DVRs. Hopefully some of those who raised your hands have DVRs. Hopefully some of you actually have TiVos, the real thing. I'm sure some of you don't. But a byproduct of that service is we get a lot of data back from it. Again, very strict privacy policy in place on top of that. But we can take that data, and it's very granular because it comes second by second. And we can match that up with commercials that run. And we have all this, we also know whether it's live or time shift. And you can imagine, you take all that data together and you can find out what people are watching. So that's how I know all this stuff. And this is what viewership actually looks like. And we're not going to, there's no particular significance of this particular program. This happens to be a Grey's Anatomy episode. And just think of that as time going across there, and notice how people watch. So this top line is people watching in live, the old-fashioned way of TV. All these people down here are watching on a time-shifted mode. And I suspect this is a pretty highly educated room. You could guess where the commercial breaks were, right? There's a lot of money spent on those commercials that most of the people fast-forwarded through. So sort of the takeaway at this point for you is DVRs are in a lot of households, really important households, and when they're in a household, a lot of your communications dollars are effectively wasted. So from this point on, the last couple of slides I have start to deal with what most of my clients are trying to wrestle with is, okay, I know that. There's nothing I can do about it. Now the question is, I also know that not every commercial is fast-forwarded. So the major part of my business is helping agencies and brands and networks understand what are the factors that influence how likely it is that somebody will watch a commercial versus not watching a commercial. Because it's not a binary equation. You don't have households that just fast forward through everything and other households who just watch everything. People are making choices on what they want to watch and what they don't want to watch. And there's a lot of factors that determine that. So if you're spending all this money on media, it's obviously very important to try and get as much viewership as you can for a number of reasons. One, because you want those impressions in the eyeballs. The other is, if you get all that right, that means your message is probably pretty persuasive because it's something that people have chosen to watch. So how do we figure out whether an ad is going to get watched or not? There's really two macro inputs to that. One is environment and one is creative. I started with environment here because the first thing people usually ask me in my job is, how do you create a TiVo-proof commercial? I bet it's when you have a movie star and there's really good music. And everybody jumps to this idea of it's all about how good the commercial is. And they're right, that is very important. But it actually is not the most important thing. What's more important is what environment did you run the commercial in? Sort of dominates it. And depending on which network you put your ad on, which day part you run it in, what kind of genre you're running in, what pod position, and that's a little, I don't want to get too technical here, but you probably all know what all that means, can have a dominant impact on the likelihood that somebody's going to fast forward you through a commercial or not. Time is short, and I didn't want to get too far below this, but even within networks and with specific programs, certain programs get time shifted and fast forward a lot more than other programs, and certain ads in certain programs are responded to differently by audiences than other ads in certain programs. So environment is very important. Media schedule is a dominant determinant. I will say, we're not here to talk about cable, but one thing, and you'll see this a little more later, it is a truism that there's less fast forwarding in general on cable than there is on broadcast. So it supports some of the theories that Simon's group has been espousing for a while. Creative does matter. The ad creative is important. Some ads work better than others. It's not just the ad in isolation, though. Some ads can work horribly on one program and work very well in another program. It's sort of how they tie together. And it is not always the sexy ads that win, surprisingly. Sometimes it is. Movie trailers do very well. pharmaceuticals do very well? Why the heck do pharmaceuticals do very well? The answer is not because they're particularly sexy ads. The theory is that if you suffer from a condition and there's an advertisement for some treatment that claims to help your condition, you're probably going to pay attention to it. Right? Direct response ads perform well. This is often considered sort of the bottom feeding of advertising. This is 1-800 call to buy a Bowflex. But again, the theory here, there's one thing, they run in media environments that tend to be less fast-forwarded, but the other is if you're thinking about buying a Bowflex, you're probably going to watch the ad, and you may watch it multiple times. So it's not always straight on the intuition of what you think might win. So I got 3 more slides. They're just some examples to show you how variable this can be. So this is sort of old data, and I know it's sort of hard to read, but I brought this slide anyway because I love this slide. It's very fascinating to me. So we looked at, this is last April, so it is old data, but the point remains the same. We looked for the highest rated commercials among time-shifted viewing. So we took all viewing and said, okay, let's not pay attention to live. Let's only look at people that we're watching on a time-shifted basis, which means at the touch of a button, they could fast forward through any ad they want to. So we leveled the playing field. Let's look at the commercials, the single commercial airings that got the highest rating during the month, it was last April, and there they are. So you can see DreamWorks commercial for the movie Disturbia was the highest, and then GMC trucks, and you can see what programs they ran on. So fair enough. Now what's interesting to me is you would think, wouldn't you, that the highest rated commercials would appear in the highest rated programs. It turns out that's not even close to true. So the highest rated program on a time-shifted basis for the month of April was the Grey's Anatomy that ran on April 26. In that program, there were probably about 40 advertisements. Only 2 out of those 48 advertisements made the list of the 10 highest commercials, and they were number 8 and number 10 on the list. All other of these 8 commercials on the highest list ran in programs that don't even show up on the top 10 list. Just pointing out that it's not some binary function. There were a heck of a lot of people watching that Grey's Anatomy, and they paid attention to those 2 movie trailer ads, and they fast-forwarded everything else. So you can't make the assumption that, I know, I want to reach a lot of eyeballs in this new world of DVRs, so what I'm going to do is what I've always done. I'm going to buy the programs with the biggest reach. Here's another example. This shows that the media environment can make a big difference on advertising performance. So this was an advertisement, a real one, that ran in February for a particular quick service restaurant. I won't say which one. And you might say, well, was this ad good or bad? So it ran a pretty heavy schedule. It ran in the show CSI New York, an original episode that ran on CBS in prime time, and 67% of the viewers fast-forwarded it. So you say, probably not that good of an ad because, look, that's a pretty high fast-forward rate. That same ad ran in another CSI New York that was a rerun that ran on cable, and only 40% of the people fast-forwarded it. Environment matters. That same ad ran in the Colbert Report. I don't know how people in this room feel about that show. I think it's kind of funny that I found this example. And only 29% of the people fast-forward it. Is it a good ad or not? The answer is it depends on what environment it's running in, what the audience is of that show. And if you're the media planner or the brand manager for this brand, this has profound implications for where you probably want to spend your money. Last slide. Same point turned on its head. This says within one program, there's a high variability in how much the people watch the ads. So this was an episode of House that ran last year. And I hear sometimes people say, well, people either fast forward or they don't. So in this episode of House, every commercial is going to have more or less the same rating. Couldn't be farther from the truth. So there's about 40 ads that ran in House. On average, on a time-shifted basis, the ad got a 4.7 rating. But there was an ad in the show that got a 7.3 rating, and there was another ad in the show that got a 3.2 rating, almost 2.5 times difference. Showing you again that people are voting with their remotes and deciding which ads they want to watch or not. Last slide, I know I'm out of time, the common thought is this is all well and good and scary, but what the hell do I do about it? People have DVRs, or they're fast forwarding through ads. Is it just game over? The answer is, of course, it's not game over. when we work with clients, this is what they're interested in doing. First is you got to know what's going on. So that's why I have a business. We sell this information, and if you don't understand this as a person who spends media money, you're likely to be wasting a lot of money. So first you just have to know what the facts are. And then within knowing what the facts are, you can do some things within your normal TV planning without radically changing anything else. That just moves some money around to really improve your delivery of the message you're trying to get out. And that can be changing media schedule or creative or the combinations of those things. And then the final point is, as this proliferates, it does, I believe, increase the pressure to find alternatives, ways to reach those households that you're missing. Those 50 million households who have DVRs are going to be fast-forwarding through your commercials, no matter how smart you get about optimizing it. You may still get through to them sometimes, but the frequency and the reach is not going to be anything like it used to be, and it's going to be much more expensive. So how else can you get into those DVR households? One way is TiVo has a whole business around providing new ways of advertising on the DVR, and I'm not even here to talk about that, but that's one way. There are other forms of video. Tara's going to talk about targeting ads, which is another great way to improve how much your ad gets viewed, because if it's relevant, it's more likely to be seen. And finally, over time, people are probably going to move some money out of TV, or at least into different forms of TV, because no matter how smart you get about this, you're still going to not be able to reach the DVR households like you used to. That's it. Sorry I went over 2 minutes.